Sarah Martinez had never planned on becoming a regular at Precision Point Shooting Range. 6 months ago, she was a marketing coordinator for a tech startup, spending her days behind a computer screen and her evenings binge-watching Netflix. But life has a way of throwing curveballs that change everything. The divorce papers had been finalized 3 weeks before her first visit to the range. 28 years old, suddenly single, and living in a studio apartment that felt more like a prison cell than a fresh start. Her brother Jake, a police officer, had suggested she try shooting as a way to build confidence and learn self-defense. "You need something that's just yours, Sarah," he had said. "Something that makes you feel powerful again." The first time she held a .22 caliber pistol. Her hands shook so badly she could barely load the magazine. The instructor, a patient man named Bob with graying temples and kind eyes, spent an extra hour with her that day, teaching her proper stance, grip, and breathing techniques. By the end of that first session, she had managed to hit the paper target 3 times out of 15 shots. It wasn't much, but it was a start. Now, 4 months later, Sarah was at the range every Tuesday and Thursday evening and Saturday mornings. She had progressed from the beginner .22 to a 9mm Glock, and her accuracy had improved dramatically. More importantly, those 2 hours at the range had become her sanctuary. The rest of the world disappeared when she focused on her breathing, aligned her sights, and squeezed the trigger. On this particular Thursday evening in October, the range was busier than usual. Sarah had claimed Lane 7, her favorite spot near the end where she could concentrate without too many distractions. She was working through her usual routine, 50 rounds of basic marksmanship, focusing on consistent groupings at 25 yards. The target she was using had become shredded around the bullseye area. After her last magazine, she called for a ceasefire and walked downrange to swap it for a fresh one. As she unpinned the old target, she noticed the man in the lane next to hers watching her. He was tall, probably in his early 30s, with short dark hair and the kind of posture that screamed military. His arms were covered in intricate tattoos that disappeared under his black t-shirt. Sarah tried not to stare, but she couldn't help noticing his target. Where hers showed a decent but imperfect cluster of holes around the center rings, his looked like it had been attacked by a precision machine. Every single shot was in the X-ring, grouped so tightly she could have covered them all with a quarter. "Nice shooting," she said as she walked back to her lane, trying to keep her voice casual. He nodded acknowledgement, but didn't seem particularly interested in conversation. Sarah had encountered plenty of men at the range who either ignored women completely or felt the need to offer unsolicited advice. This guy seemed to fall into the first category, which she preferred. She hung her fresh target and returned to her shooting position. As she loaded her next magazine, she became aware that several other shooters had paused to watch the man next to her. Curiosity getting the better of her, she glanced over just as he raised his rifle. It wasn't like anything she had seen before. Where most of the rifles at the range were sporting weapons or hunting rifles, this looked like something from a military arsenal. Matte black finish, tactical scope, and modifications she didn't recognize. When he fired, the sound was different too, more controlled, more precise somehow. Sarah continued her own shooting, but found herself stealing glances at her neighbor. His movements were economical, almost ritualistic. Load, aim, fire, reload. No wasted motion, no hesitation. Each shot was deliberate and purposeful. She had seen skilled shooters before, but this was something else entirely. After about 20 minutes, the man set down his rifle and began packing up his equipment. Sarah was in the middle of reloading when she heard him speak for the first time. "You've got good fundamentals," he said, his voice quiet, but carrying easily over the ambient noise of the range. Sarah looked up, surprised. "Thank you. I've been practicing." "It shows. Your stance is solid, and you're not flinching on the trigger pull. How long have you been shooting?" About 4 months, Sarah replied, feeling suddenly self-conscious about her relatively new hobby. The man raised an eyebrow. 4 months? That's impressive progress for such a short time. There was something in his tone that suggested he knew what he was talking about. Sarah found herself curious about his background, but hesitated to ask directly. Instead, she said, "I had a good instructor to start with, and I practice regularly." "Consistency is key," he agreed. "Most people don't have the discipline for it." As he continued packing his gear, Sarah noticed a small tattoo on his forearm that she recognized from her brother's police training materials. It was the trident, the symbol of the Navy SEALs. Her heart rate picked up slightly. She had never met a SEAL before, though Jake had mentioned working with some during joint training exercises. According to him, they were in a completely different league from regular military or even other special forces. The man must have noticed her looking at the tattoo because he glanced down at his arm, then back at her. "You know what that is?" "Navy SEAL," Sarah said, hoping she didn't sound as impressed as she felt. He nodded simply, without any of the bravado she might have expected. "Marcus," he said, extending his hand. "Sarah." His handshake was firm but not crushing, confident without being aggressive. "What do you do when you're not here?" Marcus asked as he continued organizing his equipment. "Marketing, mostly. Pretty boring compared to your job, I imagine." "Everyone's got their purpose," Marcus replied. "Marketing keeps the world running just as much as anything else." Sarah appreciated that he didn't dismiss her profession or try to make his own sound more exciting. There was a quiet confidence about him that she found oddly comforting. "Mind if I ask what brought you to shooting?" Marcus inquired. "Most people don't pick it up as a hobby without some kind of motivation." Sarah hesitated. She hadn't talked about the divorce with anyone at the range, preferring to keep that part of her life separate. But something about Marcus's straightforward manner made her want to be honest. "I went through a divorce recently," she said. "My brother thought it would be good for building confidence and self-reliance." Marcus nodded, understanding. "Smart brother. There's something to be said for knowing you can handle yourself." "Are you stationed locally?" Sarah asked, changing the subject. "Between deployments," Marcus replied vaguely. "I try to get to the range whenever I can. Keeps the skills sharp." Sarah wondered what "between deployments" meant for someone like him, but didn't pry. Instead, she said, "I'm here most Tuesday and Thursday evenings, and Saturday mornings. It's become my routine." "Routine is good," Marcus agreed. "Builds discipline and muscle memory." He shouldered his rifle case and picked up his range bag. "It was nice meeting you, Sarah. Keep up the good work with your shooting." As he walked away, Sarah found herself hoping she would see him again. There had been something reassuring about his presence, a calmness that she hadn't experienced around many people lately. She finished her own shooting session with renewed focus, trying to apply some of the precision she had observed in Marcus's technique. Her groups tightened slightly, and she found herself paying more attention to her breathing and follow-through. Driving home that evening, Sarah reflected on the encounter. In 4 months of regular range visits, she had met plenty of other shooters, but none had made quite the same impression. Marcus had been professional, respectful, and genuinely encouraging without being condescending. More importantly, he had treated her as a fellow shooter, rather than a woman who needed special accommodation or explanation. The next Saturday morning, Sarah found herself looking around the range, hopefully as she set up in Lane 7. Marcus wasn't there, but she tried not to feel disappointed. SEALs probably had unpredictable schedules, and she had no reason to expect him to follow the same routine she did. She worked through her usual Saturday practice, which was longer and more intensive than her weekday sessions. Bob, the instructor who had helped her get started, stopped by to check on her progress. "You're really coming along," he said, examining her target. "Your groupings are getting much tighter." "Thanks, Bob," I've been trying to focus on consistency. It shows. You know, we're starting an intermediate class next month. Might be something to consider if you want to take your skills to the next level. Sarah nodded, making a mental note to think about it. She was beginning to realize that shooting was becoming more than just a confidence-building exercise. She genuinely enjoyed the challenge of improving her accuracy and the mental discipline required for good marksmanship. As she packed up her gear that morning, Sarah found herself looking forward to Tuesday evening. Whether Marcus would be there or not, she was committed to continuing her progress. But she had to admit, part of her hoped to see that familiar figure in the next lane, working through his precise, methodical routine. The rest of her weekend passed quietly. Sarah had started reading books about firearms and marksmanship, wanting to understand more about the technical aspects of shooting. She was discovering that there was far more depth to the sport than she had initially realized. Tuesday evening couldn't come soon enough. Tuesday evening arrived with the first real chill of autumn. Sarah pulled into the Precision Point parking lot and noticed Marcus's black pickup truck in its usual spot near the back. Her pulse quickened slightly, though she tried to tell herself it was just because she was looking forward to seeing good marksmanship again. Inside, she found Marcus already set up in lane 6, the one next to her usual spot. This time, instead of just nodding, he smiled and waved her over. "Sarah, right," he said, though she could tell he remembered perfectly well. "How was your weekend practice?" "Good, thanks. I'm starting to see real improvement in my groupings." She gestured toward his target setup. "Though nothing like yours, I'm sure." Marcus had 3 different targets hung at varying distances: 25, 50, and 100 yards. The precision required for accurate shooting at those longer ranges was something Sarah couldn't even imagine attempting yet. "Distance shooting is a different animal," Marcus explained, noticing her gaze. "It's less about raw accuracy and more about reading conditions: wind, temperature, humidity. The fundamentals you're building now are what make everything else possible." As Sarah set up her equipment, she found herself stealing glances at Marcus's rifle. Today, he was using something different from Thursday's weapon. This one had an even more sophisticated scope and what looked like a custom trigger system. "That's quite a setup," she commented. "This is my precision rifle," Marcus replied, running his hand along the stock with obvious affection. "Custom built for long-range work. Most of my training these days focuses on precision marksmanship at extended distances." "What kind of distances are we talking about?" Sarah asked, genuinely curious. "Depends on the mission requirements," Marcus said carefully. "Could be anywhere from a few hundred yards to over a mile." Sarah's mind boggled at the thought of hitting a target over a mile away. She was proud when she could consistently hit the center of a target at 25 yards. They settled into their respective routines, but Sarah found the dynamic different from their first encounter. Marcus occasionally offered quiet observations about her technique, and she began to understand just how much there was to learn about marksmanship. "Your trigger control is getting better," he said, after watching her fire a magazine. "But you're still rushing the follow-through a bit. Try holding your sight picture for a full second after the shot breaks." Sarah implemented his suggestion and immediately noticed an improvement in her consistency. It was subtle, but the difference was measurable. "How do you see these things?" she asked during a pause in shooting. "I mean, I can barely tell what I'm doing wrong, but you can spot issues I don't even know I have." Marcus smiled, the first time she had seen him look genuinely relaxed. "Thousands and thousands of rounds," he said. "Plus some very demanding instructors who didn't believe in leaving anything to chance. SEAL training must be intense." "The shooting portion is just one small part," Marcus replied. "But yeah, everything has to be perfect. When lives depend on your accuracy, good enough isn't in the vocabulary." Sarah was quiet for a moment, processing the weight of that statement. She had never really considered the life and death implications of the skills Marcus possessed. "Does it ever get to you?" she asked. "The pressure of that kind of responsibility?" Marcus considered the question carefully. "You learn to channel it," he said finally. "The pressure becomes focus. The stakes become motivation. It's not about being fearless. It's about being prepared." Over the next hour, their conversation continued between shooting strings. Sarah learned that Marcus had been in the Navy for 8 years, with the SEALs for the last 5. He was originally from Colorado, had studied engineering in college, and had joined the military because he wanted to serve something larger than himself. In return, she found herself opening up about her own life in ways she hadn't expected. She told him about her marriage falling apart, about feeling lost and trying to rebuild her sense of self. Marcus listened without judgment, offering occasional insights that showed he understood more about personal struggle than his composed exterior might suggest. "I think that's part of why I like shooting so much," Sarah said as she reloaded her magazine. "It's one of the few things in my life right now that's completely under my control. If I do everything right, I get the results I want." "That's exactly right," Marcus agreed. "Shooting is honest. It doesn't care about your mood, your problems, or your excuses. It only responds to technique and discipline." As the evening progressed, Sarah noticed that Marcus was paying more attention to her shooting than his own. He had apparently finished whatever training routine he had planned and was now focused on helping her improve. "Try this," he said, moving to stand behind her. "Instead of thinking about hitting the center of the target, focus on making each shot identical to the last one. Same grip pressure, same sight alignment, same trigger pull. Let the accuracy come from consistency rather than trying to force it." Sarah implemented his advice and fired 5 shots in rapid succession. When she called for a ceasefire and brought her target forward, she gasped. The 5 shots formed the tightest group she had ever achieved, all within the 8 ring, with 3 touching the 9 ring. "That's incredible!" she exclaimed. "How did you know that would work?" "Because I've seen hundreds of people learn to shoot," Marcus replied. "Everyone goes through the same progression. You were ready for that next step." As they prepared to leave, Marcus seemed to be considering something. Finally, he said, "Sarah, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "What are your goals with shooting? I mean, beyond the confidence building your brother mentioned?" Sarah thought about it. "Honestly, I'm not sure. I just know I want to keep getting better. There's something addictive about the challenge of it." Marcus nodded thoughtfully. "Would you be interested in learning some different techniques? More advanced marksmanship skills?" "You mean like what you do? Long-range shooting?" "Not quite that advanced," Marcus smiled. "But there are intermediate skills that might interest you. Different positions, breathing techniques for longer shots, reading environmental conditions, things that would make you a much more well-rounded shooter." Sarah's heart raced with excitement. "You would teach me that?" "If you're interested and willing to put in the work. Fair warning, I have high standards. I'd expect you to practice exactly as I show you, and I won't accept anything less than your best effort." "I would love that," Sarah said immediately. "When would we start?" "Saturday morning. We could work on some extended range fundamentals. You'd need to use a rifle instead of your pistol, though." "I don't have a rifle," Sarah admitted, feeling her excitement deflate slightly. Marcus was quiet for a moment, then said something that surprised her. "I might be able to help with that. Let me think about it." Thursday's session went by in a blur of anticipation. Sarah found herself researching rifle marksmanship techniques online, watching videos, and reading everything she could find about precision shooting. The more she learned, the more she realized how much she didn't know. Marcus was there, as expected, and seemed pleased by her enthusiasm and preparation. "You've been studying," he observed, watching her implement some of the breathing techniques she had read about. "I want to be ready for Saturday," Sarah replied. I don't want to waste your time with basic questions I could have learned on my own. Good attitude, Marcus said approvingly. That's exactly the kind of preparation I look for. As Thursday's session wound down, Marcus seemed to come to some kind of decision. Sarah, I want to show you something. He opened his rifle case and began assembling the precision rifle she had seen him use earlier in the week. But instead of setting it up for his own use, he adjusted the scope and bipod to accommodate someone shorter than himself. This is a custom .308 Winchester, he explained. It's designed for precision work at extended ranges, but it's also an excellent platform for learning advanced marksmanship techniques. The trigger is exceptionally smooth, and the scope will let you see exactly what's happening downrange. Sarah stared at the rifle with a mixture of awe and intimidation. It was beautiful in a purely functional way, every component clearly purpose-built for accuracy. I can't use your rifle, she said. What if I damage it? You won't, Marcus replied with certainty. And besides, equipment is meant to be used. What good is the finest rifle in the world if it sits in a case? He spent the next 20 minutes explaining the rifle's features and safety systems. Sarah listened intently, taking mental notes on everything from the proper way to work the bolt to the specific characteristics of the scope's reticle. The most important thing to understand, Marcus said, is that this rifle is capable of far more precision than any shooter can utilize. Your limitations will always be the limiting factor, not the equipment's capabilities. That's actually liberating. It means every miss is an opportunity to learn something about your technique. As they finished packing up, Marcus handed Sarah a small notebook. I want you to start keeping a shooting journal, he said. Record every detail, weather conditions, your physical state, what worked, what didn't, any observations about your technique. Serious marksmanship requires serious documentation. Sarah felt a thrill of professional recognition. This was exactly the kind of systematic approach that appealed to her analytical mind. Saturday morning couldn't arrive fast enough. Sarah was at the range 30 minutes early, coffee in hand, notebook ready. When Marcus arrived, he brought additional equipment she hadn't expected: a portable weather station, a spotting scope on a tripod, and a shooting mat. Long-range shooting is about controlling variables, he explained as they set up. The more precisely we can measure conditions, the more precisely we can predict bullet behavior. The morning air was crisp and still. Perfect conditions for precision shooting, according to Marcus. He set up targets at 50, 75, and 100 yards, distances that seemed impossibly far to Sarah. We'll start at 50, he said. Same fundamentals as pistol shooting, just with different equipment and longer sight radius. Marcus demonstrated first, taking his time to establish proper positioning on the shooting mat. His movements were deliberate and methodical, each action serving a specific purpose. When he fired, the rifle's report was sharp and authoritative, quite different from the pistol shots Sarah was accustomed to. Through the spotting scope, Sarah could see that his shot had hit dead center of the bullseye. It looked impossibly precise. Your turn, Marcus said, stepping back from the rifle. Sarah's hands trembled slightly as she took position behind the rifle. The weight and balance were completely different from her pistol, and the scope presented a view of the target that was almost surreal in its clarity. Take your time, Marcus coached. There's no rush. Focus on your breathing and let everything else fade away. Sarah settled in, adjusting her position according to Marcus's guidance. Through the scope, the target seemed close enough to touch. She concentrated on her breathing, just as she had learned with pistol shooting, and slowly applied pressure to the trigger. The rifle's recoil was surprisingly manageable, and through the scope she watched her bullet strike the target just outside the 8-ring. For a first shot with an unfamiliar rifle at a distance she had never attempted before, it was remarkably good. Outstanding, Marcus said, genuine approval in his voice. That's exactly what I wanted to see. Controlled, deliberate shooting. The precision will come with practice. As the morning progressed, Sarah found herself becoming more comfortable with the rifle. Marcus's coaching was patient but demanding, pushing her to maintain perfect technique even when fatigue began to set in. Precision shooting is as much about mental discipline as physical skill, he explained during a rest period. Anyone can fire accurate shots when they're fresh and relaxed. The test of a true marksman is maintaining that accuracy under stress, fatigue, and adverse conditions. By the end of the session, Sarah was consistently hitting the 8 and 9 rings at 50 yards, with several shots touching the 10 ring. For someone who had never used a precision rifle before, her progress was remarkable. "How do you feel?" Marcus asked as they began packing up. "Exhausted," Sarah admitted, "but also exhilarated. I had no idea how much concentration precision shooting required." "You did exceptional work today," Marcus said, "but I have to ask, are you sure you want to continue with this? The level I'm talking about training you to requires serious commitment. Multiple sessions per week, extensive practice, and a level of dedication that most people aren't prepared for." Sarah looked down at the rifle she had just spent the morning learning to use. The thought of stopping now, when she was just beginning to understand what real marksmanship entailed, was impossible to consider. "I'm sure," she said without hesitation. "More sure than I've been about anything in a long time." Marcus smiled, and Sarah realized it was the first time she had seen him look genuinely pleased rather than just professionally satisfied. "In that case," he said, "I think it's time we had a serious conversation about what advanced training really means." 3 weeks into their advanced training regimen, Sarah had transformed into a different shooter entirely. Where once she had been satisfied with hitting the general area of a target, she now demanded precision that would have seemed impossible during her early days at the range. Marcus had been true to his word about high standards. Every session pushed her beyond what she thought she could achieve. Their training schedule had intensified to 4 days per week, Tuesday and Thursday evenings for technical skills, and extended sessions on Saturday and Sunday mornings for distance work. Sarah's shooting journal had grown thick with detailed observations about wind conditions, ammunition performance, and the minute adjustments required for different shooting positions. The relationship between student and instructor had evolved as well. Marcus remained demanding and precise in his coaching, but Sarah had begun to see glimpses of the man behind the professional facade. He spoke occasionally about his team, his deployments, and the weight of responsibility that came with his profession. In return, Sarah found herself sharing her own struggles and discoveries as she rebuilt her life after the divorce. "You're developing real capability," Marcus told her during their Thursday evening session. "Your fundamentals are solid enough now that we can start working on advanced techniques." They had progressed to consistent accuracy at 100 yards, and Sarah was beginning to understand the subtle factors that influenced precision shooting. Wind reading, elevation adjustments, and the complex ballistics calculations that Marcus performed intuitively were starting to make sense to her analytical mind. "I've been thinking about competition shooting," Sarah mentioned as they packed up that Thursday. "There's a local precision rifle match next month. Beginners are welcome." Marcus paused in his equipment organization. "That's a big step. Competition shooting is different from training. There's pressure, time constraints, and other shooters watching every move you make. Do you think I'm ready for it?" "Technically, yes. Mentally..." Marcus studied her face carefully. "That depends on how you handle pressure. Some people thrive on it, others fold." Sarah considered this. "Only one way to find out, right?" "True enough. If you're serious about competing, we should modify your training to prepare for match conditions. That means shooting under time pressure, dealing with distractions, and learning to perform when it matters." The next Saturday's session took place under threatening skies, with gusting winds that made precision shooting significantly more challenging. Marcus set up a series of exercises designed to simulate competition stress. timed strings of fire, rapid position changes, and targets at varying distances that required quick scope adjustments. Competition isn't just about accuracy, Marcus explained as Sarah struggled with a particularly challenging sequence. It's about maintaining accuracy while managing time pressure and physical demands. Sarah's performance under these conditions was inconsistent at first. Shots that would have been easy under calm, untimed circumstances became difficult when she had to factor in wind holds and time constraints. But gradually, she began to adapt. The key is treating pressure as just another environmental factor, Marcus coached, like wind or temperature. You acknowledge it, account for it, and don't let it control your shooting process. By the end of that session, Sarah was managing the pressure exercises with growing confidence. Her groups weren't as tight as under perfect conditions, but they were consistent and predictable. More importantly, she was beginning to understand the mental game that separated good shooters from great ones. "I want to show you something," Marcus said as they prepared to leave. He pulled out his phone and showed her a video of a precision rifle competition. "This is the type of event you'd be entering. Watch how the shooters manage their time and maintain their shooting process under pressure." Sarah studied the video intently, noting how the competitors moved efficiently between shooting positions and managed their equipment. It was clear that success required more than just marksmanship skill. It demanded tactical thinking and time management as well. "The match you're interested in is a good beginner event," Marcus continued. "Challenging enough to be meaningful, but not so difficult that it would be discouraging. If you're serious about this, I think you should enter." "Would you be there?" Sarah asked, realizing suddenly how much she had come to depend on Marcus's guidance and support. "I'll be there," Marcus confirmed. "Not as your coach during the match. That would violate competition rules. But I'll be there to observe and help you prepare." The following weeks intensified their training focus on competition preparation. Marcus borrowed additional equipment to simulate match conditions more accurately, including a shot timer that added audible pressure to their exercises. Sarah's shooting journal began to include detailed analysis of her performance under various stress conditions. "Your technical skills are where they need to be," Marcus assessed during their final pre-competition training session. "The question now is whether you can execute under pressure when it really matters." The morning of the competition arrived with perfect shooting conditions, cool temperatures, minimal wind, and clear skies. Sarah arrived at the range 2 hours early, Marcus having drilled into her the importance of thorough preparation and equipment checks. The other competitors were an intimidating mix of experienced precision rifle shooters, many with military or law enforcement backgrounds. Sarah felt out of place among their professional-grade equipment and confident demeanor, but Marcus's training had prepared her for exactly this feeling. "Confidence comes from preparation," he reminded her as they reviewed her shooting data from previous sessions. "You've done the work. Trust your training and execute what you know." The match consisted of 3 stages: precision shooting from prone position at known distances, a rapid-fire sequence requiring position changes, and a final stage with unknown distance targets that tested range estimation skills. It was exactly the type of comprehensive challenge that Marcus had prepared her for. As Sarah prepared for her first stage, she noticed Marcus position himself where he could observe her performance. His presence was reassuring, though she knew she would have to rely entirely on her own skills once the shooting began. The first stage went well. Sarah's months of position training with Marcus paid off as she settled into a stable prone position and worked through the target sequence methodically. Her shots were consistent and accurate, placing her in the middle of the field after the first stage. Between stages, Marcus approached briefly. "Good shooting," he said quietly. "You're staying within your capabilities and not trying to do more than you're prepared for. That's exactly right." The second stage proved more challenging. The rapid position changes and time pressure created exactly the kind of stress that had initially frustrated Sarah during training. But Marcus's conditioning exercises had prepared her well, and she managed the transitions efficiently while maintaining acceptable accuracy. As she finished the second stage, Sarah realized something had changed in her mindset. The pressure that had initially felt overwhelming was now manageable, even energizing. She was beginning to understand what Marcus meant about channeling pressure into focus. The final stage presented unknown distance targets at ranges from 75 to 150 yards. Without known distances, shooters had to estimate range and adjust their scopes accordingly. This was an advanced skill that Marcus had introduced only recently in their training. Sarah approached each target systematically, using the range estimation techniques Marcus had taught her. The first few shots confirmed her distance estimates were accurate, and she settled into a rhythm of estimate, adjust, fire, and move to the next target. Halfway through the final stage, Sarah encountered a target that stumped her. The distance was difficult to judge due to terrain features, and her first shot missed entirely. She could feel frustration building, the kind of pressure that Marcus had warned could derail performance. Taking a deep breath, she applied the mental discipline techniques they had practiced. Instead of rushing a correction, she carefully reevaluated the target, adjusted her scope, and fired again. This shot hit the scoring rings, confirming her corrected distance estimate. As she prepared for her final shot of the match, Sarah noticed Marcus watching intently from the sideline. Something in his expression suggested this moment was significant beyond just competition results. The final target was positioned at an angle that made distance estimation particularly challenging. Sarah took her time, applying every technique Marcus had taught her about reading terrain and using reference objects. Her scope adjustment felt correct, and she settled into the shooting position with confidence. As she prepared to fire, Sarah heard Marcus call for a brief safety pause. The range officer acknowledged, and all shooting stopped temporarily. Sarah maintained her position, wondering what had prompted the interruption. Marcus approached her shooting position, moving with the deliberate purpose she had come to recognize. Without explanation, he knelt beside her and began making subtle adjustments to her rifle setup, minor modifications to scope settings and bipod position. "Trust me," he said quietly, his voice carrying a weight that suggested this moment was about more than just technical adjustments. Then, to Sarah's complete surprise, Marcus handed her his personal precision rifle, the one she had trained with extensively but which belonged unmistakably to him. It was the rifle that represented years of his own training, countless missions, and professional expertise. "Use this for your final shot," he said simply, then stepped back from the firing line. Sarah stared at the rifle, understanding intuitively that this gesture carried significance far beyond the competition. Marcus was not just lending her equipment, he was expressing complete confidence in her abilities and acknowledging her transformation from amateur enthusiast to serious precision shooter. The rifle felt familiar in her hands from their training sessions, but knowing it was Marcus's personal weapon added weight to the moment. Every other competitor and observer at the range seemed to recognize the significance of a Navy SEAL entrusting his precision rifle to a civilian shooter. Sarah settled into position behind the rifle, applying every technique Marcus had taught her over the past months. The scope's clarity revealed the target in perfect detail, and she could feel the rifle's inherent accuracy waiting to be utilized. Her breathing settled into the controlled rhythm Marcus had drilled into her. The wind conditions were stable, and her range estimate felt confident. Everything aligned as she applied steady pressure to the trigger. The shot broke cleanly, and through the scope, Sarah watched the bullet impact dead center of the scoring ring. It was the most accurate shot of her entire competition, fired with a rifle that represented the pinnacle of precision shooting capability. The range fell silent for a moment before erupting in applause from other competitors and observers. Sarah realized she had not just fired an accurate shot. She had demonstrated complete mastery of the fundamentals Marcus had taught her. As she handed the rifle back to Marcus, their eyes met briefly. No words were necessary. Both understood that something significant had just occurred. Sarah had proven herself not just as a student, but as a marksman worthy of using equipment that Marcus trusted with his own professional reputation. "Outstanding shooting," Marcus said as he reclaimed his rifle. "That's exactly what I trained you to be capable of." When the final scores were tallied, Sarah had placed third in the novice division, a remarkable achievement for someone who had been shooting for less than 6 months. But the placement seemed secondary to the moment when Marcus had stepped back and trusted her with his personal rifle. At the awards ceremony, Sarah stood on the podium holding her bronze medal, but her attention was focused on Marcus in the audience. His slight nod of approval meant more to her than any trophy could. Later, as they packed equipment in the parking lot, Marcus finally addressed what had happened during that final shot. "You've progressed beyond being my student," he said matter-of-factly. "Today you proved you're a marksman in your own right. That final shot wasn't about my rifle, it was about your capability." Sarah understood. The rifle had been a symbol, but the skill was entirely her own. Months of disciplined training, careful attention to fundamentals, and gradual building of confidence had culminated in that moment of complete competence. "What happens now?" Sarah asked. "Do we keep training?" Marcus smiled, the relaxed expression of someone whose mission had been accomplished successfully. "Now you train yourself," he said, "and maybe when you're ready, you start teaching others what precision shooting really means." As they parted ways that afternoon, Sarah realized that her journey had come full circle. What had begun as a desperate attempt to rebuild confidence after her divorce had evolved into genuine mastery of a demanding skill. More importantly, she had discovered capabilities within herself that she had never known existed. The next Tuesday evening, Sarah returned to Lane 7 at Precision Point Shooting Range. But instead of waiting to see if Marcus would appear, she set up her equipment with the confidence of someone who belonged there. She had become the shooter she had once only hoped to be. When Marcus did arrive and set up in the adjacent lane, their interaction had shifted subtly. They were no longer teacher and student, but two serious marksmen sharing the range. The transformation was complete. Sarah Martinez had found not just her shooting ability, but herself. As she fired her first magazine of the evening, each shot precise and deliberate, Sarah reflected on how much her life had changed since that first shaky attempt to hit a paper target. The woman who had once doubted her ability to handle anything was now capable of precision that demanded respect from even the most skilled professionals. The rifle Marcus had trusted her with during that final competition shot had been more than equipment. It had been acknowledgement that she had earned her place among serious shooters, and stepping back to watch her succeed had been his recognition that her journey to competence was complete. Sarah's shooting journal that evening contained just one entry: "Mission accomplished."